We're about to continue, of course, our conversation with Mr. James Ngcobo, and I just want to take it back to where you grew up, because I find it fascinating. I think for me it informs, one's love and passion and destiny and route to where they end up in life. Take us back to where you grew up and how your upbringing was.
I'm a Devonite. I grew up in a township called Wamashu. I'm the 10th of 12 kids, and so waking up in the morning was like waking up with a village in my house.
Yeah.
And I guess my love of story is then sort of comes from my upbringing. My mother's mother was such an amazing orator, and I loved spending time with her. One of the things that she left me with is a love of cooking, and I used to sit with them and going back to the village to go and pick mushrooms, and she would take the poisonous ones, which in my language are called eNCA. And I used to watch this woman's hands, and wild spinach and cooking and the magic of a meal being made with my grandmother. And when there's so many of you, just the moments of being with her were just so glorious for me, and I think that left an indelible mark for me in terms of stories, because she just really used to tell me stories. And then years later, when I was at school, I sort of collided with an amazing man called William Shakespeare.
Okay.
In a set work called The Merchant of Venice, and just fell in love with the weaving of the words, with the story, with the collision of the biographies, and a need for the story to be told, and looking at a story of a man called Shylock, who's Jewish, who's persecuted where he is, and looking at the pertinence of his life to the time, the tapestry that I was growing up, and I realized that there's a beautiful universality about story, and this is a thing that even now is really who I am about stories. For me, it doesn't matter where the story comes from. If it dissects the human condition, and it's about people, and it makes me feel like it matters, I can put a pause on my life, and I can woo an audience to watch this story. Those are things that I absolutely love to produce. And I always say, my mantra: theatre is not black or white. Theatre is good or bad.
What did you prefer? Because you've been, as we bring in, I'll tell you why, because you spoke about the cooking with your grandmother and how much you love to cook. I'm going to ask Chef Sia to bring in that chicken and chakalaka dish. I want to see what you think of this. But I'm curious. Actor, of course, a lot of people will know you from hard copy, of course. Actor, producer, or director. What do you prefer? What's the best way for you as James to convey your message? Can you pick?
You know what, Gareth? It's actually what is so beautiful about it. All of it is a navigation of story. There is something that happens to me when I act, when there are decisions that I don't have to make, big creative decisions. When you mention hard copy, is one of my favorite things that I've ever done as an actor. And so when I'm acting, those other responsibilities are obviously with the director. When you're producing something, you go out and look for it, and look for a certain palette that and yet again it's still story. And when I direct something, it just has to grab me somewhere. I mean, the last piece that I directed this year is called The Brother's Size. It's set in Louisiana. And I read this piece, and I was immediately hit by the cosmology, the Yoruba cosmology that is in this play, that takes you even way back to the transatlantic slave trade, to Harriet Tubman, to just the movement of people from West Africa to the south of America, and of the United States. And I sat with actors and we had to work on that lilt, to work on that accent, to work on the lives of these people. And for me, it goes that deep about telling story.
Imagine working with James on set as an actor. Very quickly though, you mentioned palette. Can we just bring in Chef Sia? Because I promoed that plate, the one in your left hand there, Sia. I think, how many have you got? Bring them in. Okay, because this is interesting. Come on in, Salong. You were telling us off air, this is what exactly? What is this, Sia?
Okay, so what we have here is chicken giblets and chicken feet. So we call it umbeko.
Wow.
So you eat meat today, you don't finish it, you leave it. The following day is that cold
I'll
meat.
have to worry about
So what I have done is I've taken it, I use the gelatinous from the chicken feet, I pull the meat out and I pressed it together with a corn, a little bit of some herbs in there, green onion, and some chakalaga and the corn salsa with onion.
So Cook James, you just had a bite of the chicken dish from earlier. Are we approving?
Oh,
Is this going to be Sunday lunch on Father's Day?
This is stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
Sia, thank you. This looks absolutely incredible as well. So are you quite the chef in the kitchen as well, or you just like to dabble?
In my house, I'm always cooking. I mean, people who know me very well, they'll tell you I'm always thinking of food. I was talking, I think, to Jenny Chris Williams, and she said to me, James, I believe you love cooking.
Yeah.
People say you always cook. I said to her, well, I cheat on my wife with ingredients. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I'm lying next to her. I'm thinking petty pans, parsnip, brinjal. You know, I'm always, you know, and when I was growing up in my 20s, I hit a big problem. I realized girls didn't really like me, so I had to cook for girls.
Was that the
I
trick?
was a come for lunch.
There's some dating advice for
I
you.
was a come for lunch kind of guy,
my
and she must still
goodness.
find me cooking, and I'm making
yes,
pour a
That
glass
wasn't
of wine.
Netflix and chill. That was Netflix and cook.
Yeah.
Back in your day.
Yes.
I love that. Hopefully
man.
we can hear from someone who can make this over the weekend from what Chef Sia was saying as well about this latest dish of chicken as well. I'm curious though, the youngsters coming through. We spoke to a couple of artists a few weeks ago, young performing artists coming up. But their entire world has changed. Even from 2009, 2010, social media wasn't that big. What are you finding with the youngsters? Do they want to be actors or do they want to be famous? It's two different things.
If you want to be famous, I think your into the industry is very problematic. Because there is a humility about being a storyteller that is needed no matter what era we're in. Just like a curiosity and a need to understand what's there as a young actor. And so I was talking about mentorship earlier, and then the other thing, then the mentorship is from my generation to young people, but young people need also to have the humility to learn. When I was a young actor, I worked with giants of actors who had been acting for 40 years, 35 years. And at some moments I thought, maybe my opinion is not that important in this room. I need to learn from these people when we're working on a play and we're doing accent work and an actor will do an accent, a Scottish accent, and the director will say, oh, I absolutely love it. And the actor will say, but this is more Edinburgh, we can go up north. You know, and it's just amazing to see the skill that and I'm a firm believer that what we need to do in these spaces that I'll be doing at the Joburg Theatre is just to challenge ourselves, challenge the artists that we work with, challenge our patrons to come and watch something that is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And that is how you evolve storytelling and evolve spaces by constantly looking for something that maybe has never been curated before in the theatre and find a way to stage that work and see what type of catchment it will be for audiences, and so the idea of commissioning writers to write and is one of the things I'll be doing at the Joburg Theatre, to just look at new work, look at the emerging voices. And at the same time, look at classics. You know, there are beautiful classics that are timeless. You fly to London. When you land in London, you still find an Arthur Miller is the hottest ticket in London. You have to be squeezed in to watch a work like that. And when there's a beautiful revisit to such pieces, you take in mind that there's a generation of an audience that has never seen that work, a generation of directors that have never put their hands on the work, and actors who've never had a moment to sink their teeth on the work. But for me, I really am inspired about around the idea of how we are evolving as a country. We were a country that we were alone for a very long time, and the idea that we are now in the universal space. You know, I take a lot of work overseas. I took a production of mine 3 years ago. It taught Liverpool, Hull, Derby, Lancaster, Newcastle, and we went down to Bristol, and to to take a story that is written in South Africa that you don't have to explain to anyone because it's universal. It's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And you meet people in the pub afterwards. They're not saying to you what's the story about. They got the emotion in the piece. And so whether I'm directing an Irish piece that is about the British occupation of Ireland, or whether I've got a piece from Fiji, or I'm directing a piece from Accra, the link of all these stories is humanity.
And I want to talk about the audience for a moment because, I mean, I think it's important with just the passion you speak of in the arts. It's not just entertainment. There's a very important role that I'm hearing you as you speak that the arts plays in politics, in civil society, in shaping views, perceptions about a certain area, an individual, a place, a space in time. How important is that role, and what is that role particularly that the arts is playing?
I love that too, because also what you don't want is a passive audience just sitting there. And I love the idea that the audience is the last character that comes into the whole process, and they sit there with such curiosity, looking at the story unfold, and in wonderment as to where does it go. So we the idea of being in this marriage with an audience too. We've gone we had sort of like hurdles sometimes in the country where there was a death of thought and all these things. It is important that the theatre space is not just an entertainment space.
Got you.
I love the idea of bringing people from academia to come and deliver academic papers that are pertinent to the now, because that feeds onto the programming. And to also say that audiences don't have to go to the theatre just to sit in the theatre and watch something. There are moments when we have to interact with the audience.
It's the interaction that I want to talk about when we come back in a couple of minutes, because you were talking about going over to the UK tours, a universality of the plays. What about the indigenous languages? What about that? And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
You enjoy the chicken, you enjoy the steak.